Hey everybody, this is Eric Conley, Garrett County 4-H Youth Development Agent, and this is another 4-H Career Conversations. Today I have with me Dr. David Hayes. He is a associate professor at Eastern Kentucky University in the Biological Sciences Department, and also an aquatic invertebrate zoologist. So, how you doing today, Dr. Hayes?
I'm doing great. How you doing, Eric?
I'm doing well. So I sent you the questions, and like I told you before, we'll just go straight down, and you just give me as much information or as little information as you see fit. Okay. So first of all, what do you remember wanting to be when you grew up?
I saw that question and I realized I don't remember what I
Yeah.
wanted to be when I grew up. I recall like drawing like firemen, but can't really say being a fireman or a police officer. I probably just said that because that's what the other kids were saying,
Right.
but I don't know that I thought about that. And it wasn't until really high school when I started thinking about what I would go to school for. I thought maybe computers, something like that. I had interests, but I really didn't really know what kind of employment opportunities there were for things within my area of interest. I'm a biologist now, but I really had no clue back then that people could just go and be a biologist, or that there were so many different types of career paths within the field of biology. Even though that was one of my passions, I didn't really realize that was a career opportunity.
Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be a herpetologist. We had a dress up as your future career day in fourth grade, and I remember I wore a lab coat and I broke my mom's broom and I had taped a wired hanger hook and then had a fake snake that was on the end of it, and I didn't quite make it as a herpetologist. So, but I get to play with snakes occasionally
I
here.
dabbled in herpetology for a little bit, and then I opened my eyes to the diversity of the invertebrate world later on.
So the next question is, what I sent you was, what was your first job requiring a completed application? But if there was a job that you had before that you did not have to complete an application for, you could talk about that one as well. And every recording I've mentioned that when I was 14, my uncle so graciously offered my services to work in tobacco to one of his friends. I clearly didn't have to fill out an application for it, but it's probably, it was good because it was hard work and all those kinds of things. So if you have a non-application job and your first job that you actually applied for, I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, so I spent many summers working at a Boy Scout camp. So I was 14 when I started working at the Boy Scout camp as a counselor in training. I'm sure I probably had to fill out something for that. But then spent the next 6 or 7 summers working at a Boy Scout camp. And early on, I floated around to different areas, but later on, I was in what we used to call the nature area, but now it's called ecology conservation area. And then, sort of my last year there, I was the last couple of years there, I was the director of ecology and conservation. But yeah, 14 years old was when I first started there. And then I worked at other places like car washes. I was back before everything was automatic. I would have to take people's money and press a button, which I was later replaced by a machine that would do that. I worked at like softball field concessions, where they'd have different softball and baseball leagues, and I'd fry up burgers and that kind of stuff. And those are probably the main ones that I remember from, under 18. Those are my main jobs.
Right. Yeah. And I remember all of like when I was young, my dad got me a job at Kroger. Literally when I turned 16, he took me to Kroger and I filled out an application and started work that day. So I'm not sure that I was actually in the system. And I know that I wasn't definitely a real employee, but he gave me the uniform and said, go and do what I tell you to do. So,
Nice.
but such is the nature of parenting. But so the next question is so the job that you do now uh, as a professor or also as an aquatic invertebrate zoologist, what are the educational requirements for the work that you do now?
Yeah, so as a professor, generally it's a PhD required. There are a few positions that we have that are primarily just instruction based, like you don't do research, and occasionally you can get those with just a master's degree. And so obviously for all those, you need at least an undergraduate BS or BA to move on to the master's or PhD. But I have a lot of my former students that work in natural resource fields and stuff, you know, the undergraduate degree or the MS is generally enough for other tracks within biology, natural history, that type of stuff. But for us, it's the PhD level.
Okay. And so tell me about the work that you do as a professor now.
Yeah, so about technically half my time is spent teaching in the classroom. I teach classes like general zoology, freshwater inverts. I've recently started teaching molecular biology. And so half my time is generally spent in the classroom. And then a quarter of my remaining time is directed towards research efforts. And so that's pretty open as to what I want to pursue in terms of research interests. Me, I primarily work with freshwater mussels and crayfish, and I do DNA analysis of them. But you know, nobody's telling me exactly what I need to be doing research on. That's kind of the nice part about being a professor. You have this autonomy and freedom to sort of explore what's whatever interests you. And then the remaining quarter of my time is service. So I serve on various committees, and I'm an academic advisor, and I fill out reports for other committee work. I'm also curator of the Branson Museum of Zoology. Here at EKU, we have a large collection of invertebrates, so crayfish and mussels. We also have large collections of fish and amphibians and reptiles and plants. But I'm basically the caretaker of our collections of invertebrates, and these are the largest collections, natural history collections in the state of Kentucky.
Nice. Yeah, I've dabbled a little bit, and for those of you all that don't know, Dr. Hayes was my graduate advisor. I did not get to complete my program, although I wish I would have, but I took several classes with Dr. Hayes, so I can understand. I took malacology with him, and I mean, I basically aced it. I mean, so
aquatic entomology too. The one semester I taught aquatic entomology.
Yeah, I took. I think I took aquatic inverts. Did I take that with you? Maybe.
Yeah, you did.
I took one of them with Gunter Schuster, with Dr.
Oh, okay.
And so that was a great, fun class. So we'll move on to the next one. So what are some of the challenges of your career now as a professor?
Yeah, I guess there's just the drudgery that comes along with any job that you get, you know. Anybody, I don't know who gets excited about poring over Excel spreadsheets or submitting purchase orders or tons of committee meetings and that kind of stuff, or, you know, putting out fires. You know, there's always something going on that we have to try and come up with a solution. So,
Not literally.
But what's that?
Not literally fires.
No. I mean, hopefully not. I do work in a lab, but usually things are pretty safe and calm in there. But yeah, just the general, what I call the drudgery of it, that it's all necessary to sort of keep the big machine rolling, and that kind of stuff is part of every single job. And it's like, you have to do this to do the stuff that you really like to do and that you're really interested in, the stuff that gets you going there every single morning. You still have to do some of that drudgery stuff. But,
right.
So I'm pretty fortunate. It's a great job. And so, you know, even though I complain about the drudgery, I still wouldn't give it up. You know?
Right. So what about some of the joys of your job then?
I guess one is just seeing where the students go. I mean, I train students in, you know, in the classroom and in research, advising research and stuff like that. And my students have gone on to do, you know, much more impactful things than I've ever done in terms of the field of conservation and biology. So they end up going to places like state agencies like Kentucky Division of Water or Kentucky Fish and Wildlife Resources or environmental consulting firms. Some of them go into the medical field. and or some of them are in sort of laboratory fields. I've got one student that just is in the hemp industry now, working in a lab. So it's one of the joys, just seeing what they're able to do with their degree after they get sort of the general training from me. And that's sort of, you know, my job is to prepare them for the workforce, or, you know, at least get them content and skills that prepare them for the workforce. So one of the joys is getting to see where they end up. And then the other part is, at least in terms of the research, is the discovery aspect of science. You know, you'd think going in your backyard, everything is known and discovered, but it's really not. There's lots of opportunities to discover things right here. So just last semester, we were doing some DNA work on crayfish, and I'm pretty sure students in my molecular biology class who were generating the DNA data for it discovered 3 new species of crayfish that have been just like right out in people's backyard, you know. But looking at the DNA, they're really different, and it sort of makes sense given the historical geology in the area and stuff. And so for me, that's the most exciting part. When I get that data back and I get to do a first analysis in it, like I get to see, wow, this is something new that somebody hasn't recognized before, even though it's been, you know, staring us in the face. It's probably on the shelf in a museum, but it's probably called by something else. Somebody hasn't recognized its uniqueness of it. And so, yeah, that's the thing that I really enjoy is, you know, once I get that data back, I'm like, right now, I'm the only person in the world that knows this little tiny nugget of information. And then I'm like, I got to tell people about this, you know, and there might be a few people that actually care about it. But then comes the hard work of like the writing it up and putting it together for publication, which, you know, I haven't gotten to yet for that particular project. But, you know, there's the communication aspect of science, is sort of telling people about those discoveries. But yeah, just the process of discovery. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I liked flipping over rocks and discovering here's a crayfish or a salamander or something like that. And now I'm sort of just doing discovery on a different scale, I guess. You know, I'm just sort of discovering species based on their DNA rather than just finding something in the backyard.
If you don't mind, if I go off the question list real quick, so you made this discovery of these 3 different species of crayfish, right? Based on genetics or whatever. So how long will it take you from you getting the information to that information being published and being accepted by I guess the global biological community? So,
oh, if I was good, it would only be like a few months turnaround time, but I'm not very good, so it'll probably be a few years. You know, I'm a little slow. You know, Eastern is great in that they give you lots of opportunity to research and they encourage it, but it's not like an R1 institution like University of Kentucky or University of Louisville, where you really have to keep publishing and keep that money flowing. And so not being under the gun for that, other priorities sort of, you know, take over, like your courses and stuff like that. So
right.
It shouldn't take as long as it takes me, but I'm kind of slow in just getting the writing up, you know.
Yeah, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Oh, that's fine.
I'm always curious because, you know, so I got to publish the tiniest little article in a journal once about a new tree species that we found in Lexington, or we had not seen there before, and it was an invasive species, of course. And so I probably rewrote that thing maybe 12 times because it was like, oh no, there needs to be a semicolon here. And it was like no more than a paragraph. So I'd put the semicolon, then they would write me back and be like, no, this needs to be double spaced. There needs to be 2 spaces between these words here. And it's like, ew. So anyway.
Well, that makes me feel better given that you have a background in English.
Yeah. So and with that kind of writing, it was nerve wracking because I thought I was doing it right, especially as I was trying to research how to write that particular way, and anyway, so I was met with a lot of challenges there. So the last 2 questions I have is for somebody who might be interested in your career field. what are some things that they can do on the front end to prepare themselves. And some people that I've interviewed have kind of bled this question into what are youth opportunities in your field. So if you want to blend those two things together, or you can separate them out, however you want to do that.
Yeah, so I think doing things like 4-H is something that can help cultivate that interest in biology and provide opportunities for gaining experience in the field of biology. I know you're involved in Envirothon as well. I did that when I was a high schooler. It was a great experience. And so the other thing that I sort of learned probably a little bit later on was to learn to enjoy reading a lot more, because that's, I feel like that's where insight comes from, reading what other people have done already. And then I guess in terms of youth opportunities, we don't really have many at the university level. But like I said, I would get involved with things like 4-H, Envirothon, scouting, any of those things that get you outside, and just being outside in nature. If that's sort of what your interest, know that there are multiple different types of career paths that would have you out in nature and enjoying nature, but also making contributions to the scientific understanding and scientific discovery. But most of our opportunities sort of, for at least for me, students that work with me and in my lab, they all have to be EKU students essentially.
Yeah, and I think as one for especially for young people is that we've become kind of, well, not become, but we are a tech-based world, and there's so many things that a young person can do with their phone. I mean, like the iNaturalist apps and those kinds of things, that they can actually be contributors to this global project of figuring out what we have on the planet. So there's, like you said, there's always things to discover, but it's it's one of those things where if you've got a phone in your hand and you're anxious to do Snapchat or Instagram or whatever, you can also take the same amount of time to take a picture of some plant that may be in your backyard, or maybe in a forest or a park that you walk in, and that may be the first time that thing has ever been seen in that particular area. So I think it's a lot easier now for kids to be engaged in some of the most base level biological sciences. And so, but yeah, anyway, I get off on a tangent.
Oh no, I troll iNaturalist for crayfish pictures that other people have posted. Like I'm like looking for that weird one, I'm like, well, usually they're a little bit fuzzy, and I wish they were, at a different angle. But at least I use it sometimes for like, finding collection localities, and sometimes like I want to go find what that person found. But yeah, it's amazing. Right now, it's all at your fingertips. When I was younger, I remember like saving for field guides and stuff, and you get a field guide for just herps or just birds or just flowers, and you build your collection. But now it's like so much of it is at the tip of your fingers that the technology itself, in theory, should complement what we're experiencing when we're out in nature. It's not necessarily, but it certainly does sometimes enhance, because oftentimes there's this desire for, you found this thing, you want to know what it is, and that's really, and you can use things like iNaturalist or your paper field guides to do that. And nowadays I'm still doing that, but I take the stuff into the lab and I take it a few steps further by looking at the DNA, so I can figure out, what is this thing?
Right. Well, I sure do appreciate you taking the opportunity to sit down with me and talk about everything that's going on with you as a professor in that career, and your career as a professor, and also as an aquatic invertebrate zoologist. So I'm going to go ahead and sign us off. My name is Eric Comley. I'm the Garrett County 4-H Youth Development Agent, and this is Dr. David Hayes, an associate professor in the Biological Sciences Department. So thank you, Dr. Hayes. I sure do appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric.